Okay. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the May 1st SIG Apps meeting. I'm Janet Kuo. I'm your host today. And let me paste the agenda in the chat so you can follow along. And we don't have announcement today, and we have two discussion topics today. The first one is the deployment name being too long, which caused replica set creation to fail. Do we have someone in the call to talk about this one?
Yeah, I can talk about. This is Ming Lu, and the ticket was, so there was a separate issue. Talk about that. I sent a meeting request to be. I sent a request for that issue to be added. I don't know. Have you received that yet? I can. Let me send to the. So this is the current issue. I'm looking at it. I just sent everyone to the. Let me send to. I send the link to everyone on the chat. So the issue was manifest itself as if we create a stateful set, the stateful set. So there's a limit on the number of characters allowed for the stateful set for the pod, and I realized not only that, the revision, the controller revision hash also has been enforced for a more stricter rule because the hash is longer. The hash is an unsigned 32, so that translates to like 10 characters. So basically that takes away extra 10 characters. The pod name, which is 63, the minus 10, the minus, then there's a dash as a delimiter. So we only allow 52 characters. So actually I pushed the PR earlier, like a couple weeks ago, just to allow the truncate the prefix. Just take the prefix. Do you guys see? Are you guys following what I'm saying? Or
Yeah, I'm following. And
okay.
so I look at the issue. I think I made a comment in 2018, and I said that the stateful set also has a label, and the label is for the pod name. And I mentioned that it's going to also limit the size of the stateful set.
Yeah, but the pod name limit is I think the pod name limit is longer, right? Because the controller revision hash is the stateful set name plus the hash. The hash takes up to 10 characters, which is int32. It's an unsigned int32. And the pod name just the stateful set name plus the replica, right? I don't think the replica will go, takes the full int32. So usually we will hit, what I've seen is the problem is we'll hit the controller. I cannot start the pod because the controller revision hash limit hit the first, right?
It's not the pod name, it's the size of the value of labels. I think that is shorter. So that label uses pod name as the label value.
Mm-hmm.
So if the pod name is too long, it doesn't fit in the label, then you will, I think you will have issues. I need to take a look at it more deeply because
I think somebody else commented on, like, what's his name? Aldo commented on the issue as well as the PR, right?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
I can provide some thoughts. So if I understand correctly, today, if you create a stateful set with a name that is too long, then the pods are never created, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, we cannot create a pod. Yeah.
So basically, what we can say is that the stateful set itself is broken. So this might qualify.
Okay, let me clarify. So I should say the pod cannot be created because the controller revision hash limit was violated.
Right, yes, I understand that, yes.
Yeah.
So, but the result is that you have a stateful set that has no pods. So essentially, this is a broken stateful set. And we've had scenarios like this in API reviews, and this is one of those scenarios that qualifies for straightening validation. So we could strengthen the validation of the stateful set name itself, so that you cannot create stateful sets that have a name longer than 64, 63.
63, yeah.
So we could do that as step one. It's not a trivial change, and it requires 2 releases, but it can be done. But limiting it,
I think
sorry, go ahead.
one thing we should do is take a step. So we have a couple of different issues with name lengths with respect to the workload controllers, right? So there's one with replica set name length. You can have a deployment that generates a replica set that has an invalid name. There's this one I was unaware of, that you could generate a controller revision inside of a stateful set that has a name that's too long, but the same thing can happen with a persistent volume claim. So there's some, and jobs also don't have a, cron job doesn't have a check when it does job creation, so you could get the same error there. So I think we could point solve these, but we should probably take a step back and like look at general name validation constraints inside of the workloads APIs, or does that seem controversial to this group?
I agree. I think it's better to fail this workload API's creation rather than have a failed pod creation. And as I was saying, I think this qualifies for it's kind of breaking backwards compatibility, but at the same time, you already have a broken stateful set. So users had to take action if they were creating stateful sets with longer names. So we're just moving the validation sooner, right?
I think what's interesting here is the revision, right? So the revision in the stateful set is part of the label, but the revision in the deployment is the annotation, right? So if I create a deployment, I will never have this problem as long as I can pass the deployment check. I will not hit the label problem. So I can pass the. Okay, this is based on my limited understanding of Kubernetes. Okay, so it seems I can create a stateful set, but when I create a pod, the pod failed because of the limit on the label. So there's a 2 level of checking here, right? For the stateful
right.
set.
So
yeah,
there are a couple. So deployments create replica sets, and replica sets create pods. The replica set also acts to some extent as a revision history of the deployment itself. For stateful set and for daemon set, it's different. The controller revision acts as a history for revisions to the user's declared intent, and they create pods directly. So when you get name problems with a deployment, it manifests in an inability to create a replica set of the correct size. Like basically you can't create the replica set, generally speaking, or we have to go look at what the exact issue is. Either you couldn't create the replica set, or you create the replica set and the replica set couldn't create the pod. For stateful set, it'll manifest as a pod creation error, or potentially a persistent volume claim creation error, depending on which naming constraint you hit. And then for daemon set, I don't think we actually have an issue there. I think that one works. I don't, at least I haven't
I believe somebody actually commented on that issue. The daemon set is just a revision, just a revision. There's no prefix of the whatever daemon set name, just that hash, right? Only the hash.
So on that, yeah, that's another inconsistency that I hope we could just migrate everything to just have the hash, so that we can have less constraints on the name
Well,
length.
If it's an
Um,
annotation, we could. So annotations, I think you're allowed to change a little bit more freely, but labels, because they're not selectable, right? Like you can have an automation that looks at an annotation, but it's not actually user selectable, because labels are user selectable. Modifying those tends to be not backward compatible. But in this case, so I mean, the first argument you made was like, okay, so for the stateful set, if we add a stricter validation, in theory, that isn't strictly speaking compatible. Like loosening validation is always backward compatible. Adding new validation that's more restrictive technically isn't. But because in effect you're creating a broken workload anyway, no one who who passed through that validation was getting anything that worked. So you're not really breaking anyone from a workload perspective. But with label selectors, if you're modifying the labels you create, that might be a bit. I mean, I'm not saying we shouldn't do it, but we should talk to API machinery and the API approvers to make sure that we're it's the right thing to do.
So yeah, my point is that we could potentially go through a deprecation period of 3 or 4 releases, I think. So yeah, I think we need to double check if that's possible. But recently there have been some efforts, especially in the job API, to move all the labels from single name, from like bare name, into well-known kubernetes.io/label, right? So I think we could take the opportunity to do this migration to add the well-known prefix, and at the same time remove the prefix name from this hash, because it's not really useful. So I think we could do those two things at this time, and of course it's going to take a few releases, but it's the right thing to do.
So why we have this 63 characters for the label restriction? Oh, okay, so because I'm asking this is if we loosen that, right? If we allow, like, you know, more characters on the label, then this problem would not exist.
I'm sure API machinery had good reasons about it. I don't know what those are. It might be some, I think we respect a few DNS rules. It might be related to that, but I'm not sure.
But isn't DNS, some of the DNS rules, like I saw like the user like 253?
Yeah, but labels are different RFC. I don't remember the number, but there might be some relationship to that. If you ask in the issue, we can dig into it, but I don't think it would be possible to change that. I'm not really sure, but I don't think so.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what do you think? What's the next step? Like, how should we proceed with this?
So I think my suggestion would be, instead of cutting the name, which is, I think it's what your PR is doing, we can proceed through this deprecation period of first removing the prefix from. I mean, we have to add a new label, a new label. Deprecate the existing one. The new label only has the prefix. Sorry, only has the hash. And additionally, we can add validations such that the stateful set name is up to 63 characters. So those would be that would be my take. It's gonna take at least 2 releases, probably more, but I think that's the correct thing to do.
Okay, I think for the second proposal you have is for the stateful set up to 64 characters check, that has already been checked, right? Has been validated when the stateful set has been created. I mean, correct me if I'm not wrong. I mean, if I'm wrong, I don't think that's necessary.
Oh, okay. I was under the impression that it was not validated. Then, if that's the case, we don't need that, and
So
we can do
so we only need to create a new label, which is only the hash, right? That's you're proposing.
yes, deprecate the old one, create a new one, and we can take the chance to add the prefix, which is
Mhm.
I guess it could be just kubernetes.io, or will it be statefulset.kubernetes.io? Do we have any present on this, Kenneth?
Sorry, I can't think of any precedent for it offhand. Janet?
No.
I see Kevin is here. Kevin, what are we using for job? I think you did those changes.
Sorry, what were you asking? The labels?
Yeah, labels and annotations. Is it just kubernetes.io?
Batch.kubernetes.io/job name, I think is that one. And then there's a same one. Yeah, I think it's batch.kubernetes.io for the job one because it's under the batch API scope. I don't know what it would be for apps. Apps, maybe.
I would say we can go with apps unless there is an existing one that is different. We can probably check once we do the PR for the.
Looking at it, at least, well, batch one was, I took that one because I think we used it for the finalizers or the annotation. I can't remember which one, but it does look like there's a stateful set pod name label stateful set.kubernetes.io. And I'm wondering if maybe they broke them out by which higher level controller represents the label.
Stateful set, that one was a little bit different. We implemented that because people wanted to be able to select particular pods inside of a stateful set when they were turning up certain structured storage workloads. I
See.
I don't know if that is broadly applicable to the other controllers.
Yeah, so the controller revision hash, yeah, unguarded. Yeah, I don't know what. I guess, yeah, I chose the batch one only because there's already an existing label in the job controller that used that one. So I'm sure apps.kubernetes.io makes sense to me.
Some of the labeling and naming conventions predate the KEP for consistent labeling and naming, right? And then we're left in place because don't break people unnecessarily.
Yep, that makes sense.
But this will be a new label, right? It will not be breaking anyone.
There is. I gotta go find the ticket. I mean, Tim Hawken. I remember he was involved in the conversation. A bunch of people were involved in a conversation for specifying the correct things to use for built-in controllers for the correct labeling schemes, and naming conventions for the attributes. I have to go look it up though. I can't remember what the exact outcome was offhand, or if it's generally applicable to this particular situation.
But I guess we have a high level idea of what we want to do, and these are details we can figure out during reviews, right?
Yeah, thanks. So how that works is this is my first meeting, and like, should I continue my PR or your organization, your team is going to implement this?
I don't have any cycles to work on this, so you can go ahead.
Okay.
Normally you would kind of lay down these details in in an issue or even a PR, I think that's fine. And we need to involve the API reviewers. And yeah, we proceed there.
Yeah, if you can guide me through, I can start a new PR. I can describe what we discussed, and you can correct me. And on the PR, yeah, thanks if you can work with me to push this. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, first, once this meeting is done, just put up a summary of what we discussed, and the next step would be to start a PR. There are a few guides around deprecation and validation tightening, things like that. Depending on what we need to do, I can send those links once I have the chance.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah. Thank you.
Cool. I think we can move on to the next topic. It's the terminating pods cap. Do we have someone in the call to talk about this one?
Yeah, I'm here. Let me look at what I put on the agenda. Yeah, so this is a KEP for it's allowing for the job controller to be a bit smarter about when you're terminating pods, if you want to include when you have a terminating, we automatically mark as failed, and then we start new pods. And there are cases I mentioned in the KEP that cause this problem to behave. Well, there was a general thought that this is also useful for deployments, but I'm a little kind of stuck on how to come up to an agreement on the naming of these fields and whether or not we should have them in the same, have both deployments / replica sets and the jobs in the same KEP, or kind of separate these into two separate KEPs, even though I do think the implementation of these is very similar. And I think that was about the original thought of why we wanted to consolidate into a single KEP. And I guess, yeah, awareness for the KEP, because I think I opened it up maybe a week or two before KubeCon, so I don't know if anyone's had a chance to really look at it. Only a few people have commented on it.
If nobody else has some thoughts, I did look at it, and I have the feeling that the deployment and replica set discussion is much longer. So, my selfishly, oh, sorry. My priorities are around job. So I would rather separate the KEP, so the details on deployment don't block the job progression. And I like the idea that you have a new field just to keep track of the number of pods that are terminating. And then we have this control to whether terminating pods block recreation, right? Those are the 2 points of the KEP.
Yeah, for the job, yeah. And then a lot of the discussion, you are right, is around the deployment and the name for that one, which I will admit I don't have strong feelings or knowledge on that matter. So I do think the KEP could get easily blocked. I thought the thought was we could have two different feature toggles, but I do understand that does make it very confusing for the outcome of a KEP if there's discussion going forward on one part of it and the other part is going forward. So I think separating them kind of makes sense to me if we want to have it be a bit cleaner when the KEP is complete.
We don't have Philip on the call today, right?
I don't think we do.
I think it's a holiday in Europe, my bit.
But yeah, so I guess I can see the. I mean, I think I could get the two caps created and then maybe we can get the reviews on the job part and then keep the discussion open for the deployment. But I guess the question for you, although, is do you think that the API, do you want to try and make the API for this be similar between deployments and jobs? Or do
So
you
I
think
guess
they should
let
be
me
kind of
let me ask this,
different?
right? So is this primarily to solve a networking problem? Or is to block creation at all? Like you just want to block creation until what point in the pod's life cycle?
I think there's a few cases. I think for deployments, I can't remember what the rationale was, but for the jobs, it was I know, although you pointed out, I think the original issue was with TensorFlow and how if you have a terminating pod with the same index, it should be fully terminated before you start a new one. Is that right?
That is correct, yes.
And then for deployments, I think it was a pretty long standing issue. So I don't want to. I actually am interested in trying to get both of them done, but the deployment, there are different cases for deployments that I remember there was a pretty long running issue. That's why Philip kind of brought this up.
I think
Oh, sorry.
one of the motivations is cost, because when you're running a deployment and then the pod is terminating, but a new one is created, you might end up triggering cluster autoscaler and paying more than you originally intended.
So is this for job or for index job?
I don't think it's specific to index job. I mean, we need it for index job, yes, but I don't think the API field would be exclusive to index.
To index job. All right. So I mean, the thing about like for deployment, the use cases that the pods are supposed to be fungible, right? Like if you have many of them, yeah, they're not, they don't have like, you know, unique network coordinates or unique names. The names are generated on the fly, right? So the idea is you have probabilistically, if you have n replicas, you have n-ish pods, depending on what you're doing with rolling updates and max surge and min availability and all that. But the guarantees we're providing there, I don't know if it would be consistent to try to like say, well, we're going to keep some of them as active even when they're like, I don't know if that would be like really benefit the use case. I get the use case for index job in particular, though. That's a little bit more compelling. So, I mean, maybe it does make sense to try to support this feature primarily for job to begin with, because there's a clear use case for the support of index jobs. And we want to use this as a primitive in order, you know, to provide some guarantees around that. I guess I would have a larger concern around how, like, without fencing, can you actually provide this guarantee? Like, I mean, doing it this way provides probably better assurance than what you could give someone today, but you know, under network partition, you could still end up with two pods, one of which that's, you know, marked as terminating, but not really in any way available because it's on a node that's basically gone. And, you know, until it times out and the node's removed and we say like, okay, it's gone forever, you still end up with some bad network coordinates there or a bad process that's not actually available.
Yeah, I'm not sure if the motivation
Or
was
wedging
so
the controller. Go ahead.
Sorry, I don't think the motivation was so much around networking, but just cost.
For
Not
Yeah.
deployment or for the TensorFlow use case?
for deployment.
Yeah, I think I posted an issue from last year where I think Philip first brought this up, and then his was auto scaling of nodes in tight environments and driving up cloud costs, and the other is they have like a scarce resource, and having the terminating one, it'll have to wait for it to get started until that thing is fully reclaimed or whatever. Those are the two cases I think for the deployments that he called out in the issue. But yeah, for jobs, I think it was, yeah, the index jobs, there's quite a.
Maybe to clarify, when we're talking about terminating pods, are we considering the state of a pod? In other words, are we assuming that pod is alive and serving traffic or working as intended? Because it seems to be that if pod has been stuck in terminating and it's not alive, and I think that's what previous talk was mentioning, I think Kenneth was saying before, that it's actually beneficial to create new pod as soon as possible, even if previous pod stuck and terminated, to avoid the outage. I understand the use case in scarce environment where you want to, when you're bound by number of nodes or pods and you want to keep it to the minimum. But at the same time, if my pod being marked as terminated and it's not available anymore, even though it lingers due to kubelet died or whatever, I want new pod as soon as possible to prevent the interruption in the service, even if that would result in multiple pods simultaneously running or being appearing in API.
Yeah, and I think generally I think the thought was this would not be that we would not be changing the behavior out from underneath people, but allowing an opt-in behavior. I think that's why I think we have it as we're gonna have it as an API field to like recreate pods once they're fully terminated or something like that. So I think that, but I do understand I can understand a case where you would want them to be recreated as soon as they get marked as terminating if you don't care about that problem of guaranteeing the unique indexes or deployment side.
Right.
But I think that makes it pretty, I'll make sure to call it out in the KEP that I think we probably, don't know if in the KEP we talk about defaults and stuff at one point, but I guess it makes sense why we would want to have this off by default and then only people can turn it on and we can, if they have this use case.
That makes sense.
So I think going forward, what I'm hearing, I think maybe I will separate the KEPs and get the job. Ideally, I know I would like to try and get this, if possible, this KEP into, I have the PR open for the code, so it's just mostly getting the KEP, understanding the design in the API field, but I think I have a pretty good understanding of implementation, so I'm hoping to try and get at least the job into this release, so I'll work on that. And then deployment, I think we can leave that open for more debate. Is there any okay, I see all those thumbs up, so I'll assume that sounds like a good way forward.
Yeah, sounds good.
And just curious, when do we decide what features go into 1.28? I can't remember when that time period is. Or sorry,
kind of now.
or which one? It would be now.
Yes, basically you have to have a, how is it called, lead opted-in label in your enhancement issue.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess I'll get them in a state to kind of separate the KEPs and get the discussion going on the deployment, and then hopefully get the job one in a better state.
Sounds good. So I just got a message about the discussion, the first discussion topic, which is about the deployment name being too long. thought we discussed that, but does anyone want to talk about that one?
Yes, I can talk about it. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. I sent the link on the chat. My discussion is about when create a deployment with name length longer than 242 characters, a public set creation fails. We have many options to solve this issue, so we should decide which to apply. Let's go through those options quickly. The first option is declare that deployment name length than 242 characters. That would make deployment max length is 242. Second option is accept long name, but internally change it to 242 characters when creating the republic set. This leaves room for replica set suffix, but that will change it again when create pod with generator name, which only use 63 characters. This will break anyone who tries to pass RS name to extract deployment name. The third option is accept long name, but internally change it to fit generate name. It's 63. This will also break as checked. Personally, I prefer third option to fix this issue. Anyone can give some advice?
I can start. I think if we go by the rationale that the replica set is not being created, then the option number one seems like the best option. Yeah, as we were discussing for a stateful set, this should be it's kind of breaking change, but it's an acceptable change because the deployment is broken anyways. So that would be my pick.
I think
Okay.
we need to investigate what will still break if we allow that. Could things like labels, have you investigate those? Not just the resource name, but also things like labels.
How about use option, first option and the third option?
I think the concern is that it would potentially break some users. That shouldn't, on the first hand, these users shouldn't have relied on parsing to get the replica name, but since we have option number one, I think that's just better.
Is there a particular situation? Anyone want to pass RS name, duplicate name to get deployment name?
I think I would prefer option 1 as well. Just Ken, what do you think?
One seems more reasonable. Seems reasonable.
Okay, okay.
Oh, I was talking on mute. I was asking, does anyone have anything they want to discuss? If not, we can end the meeting a bit earlier and we can follow up in the issue or an open PR. All right. Thanks, everyone. See you next time.
Thank you.